Hello, Floyd Smith here with Unravel Data, and welcome to our presentation. Thank you guys for waiting. We were having a couple of technical difficulties getting in, but everything's lined up now. And I will start out by moving to our slides. And the first one is just loading up. It's taking its sweet time, but it will arrive shortly. All right. Our talk today is moving big data and streaming data workloads to AWS. And our presenters are Chris Santiago. We'll get a quick hello from Chris. He'll be doing the demo and speaking quite a bit later.
Hey folks, Chris Santiago here. I lead the solutions engineering group over here at Unravel Data. Worked with a number of customers, specifically on really their whole big data journey, whether that's working on-prem in the cloud, or today's conversation, thinking about migrating some of their workloads to AWS. And so looking to share some good experiences that I've had with the customers.
And if any of you have either worked in a technology vendor before or on the customer side, you'll know how valuable sharp solutions engineers are for all of those efforts. Our CEO, just in a meeting that Chris wasn't in a few minutes ago, described Chris's time as the most valuable in the company. So Chris is the man for us on a lot of these efforts, and for the solution engineering teams as well. Oh yeah. And I'm Floyd Smith. I'm our Director of Product Marketing. I'm just a few months in with Unravel, and just thrilled to be here and to have joined. We're doing so much exciting stuff, and amazingly strong engineering group, really good on the business side, and you'll see some of that as we go into the webinar today. Oh, let me also mention before we dive in that we're going to be doing similar webinars about Google Cloud Platform and Azure in the weeks ahead. They are quite similar, the difference being the specific services we're talking about. So if you are interested in those services as well, please join those webinars, but we'll have part of it's different and part of it's very similar, because the basic steps, as I'll be pointing out soon, are quite similar. So talking a bit about our company, we have a very experienced team. That Apple logo is due to my joining, because I had 7 years in with Apple. Our market adoption is really strong. Not every customer of ours will actually put their name out there, because sometimes they see it as competitive advantage to be working with us. But even the share that will share logos with the public, you see some very strong names there. And we have 3 of the top 5 North American banks. We're getting very close to having half of the top 10. So we're growing our footprint in financial services, which is extremely demanding, as well as others. And then our technology coverage is quite broad. We cover what used to be called big data. It's still called that by many people, but others have broadened out the definition a bit. We also support streaming data, and you're going to be hearing about that and seeing that support in our discussion and demo today. I also want to point out that we have very strong partnerships. We're partners with AWS. We're partners with the Azure team. We're getting there with Google Cloud Platform. We're working with HP Enterprise. Databricks is a partner as well. So really strong group, plus a bunch of people who are not quite as big a names, but very important in the channel. So people are eager to work with us because of the problems we help solve, such as this one, cloud migration. And we are a force multiplier. So we do 3 things. We have 3 kinds to our trident. The first is on-premises, which is the source, of course, for cloud migration, is that you have on-premises workloads. That's what you're migrating. And our technologies that we've worked with for a good long time now include Hadoop, all of Cloudera stuff, Impala, Hive, Spark, and Kafka. Spark, especially as it's used to manage the Hadoop and Hive stuff. Then you have matching technologies in the cloud, of course, because the cloud providers all want to bring workloads from on-premises onto their clouds. So we look at AWS EMR, Azure HD Insight, Google Dataproc and Google BigQuery, plus Databricks and Snowflake. Databricks is very important to us. They're very successful. Quick shorthand is that you use EMR. You use EMR for a lift and shift. If you refactor and break things into pieces, that's when you probably start looking at Databricks. Snowflake is coming, and of course we run on multiple public clouds as mentioned. More technologies coming up, and please contact us for more on those stories, because that's always a big question. And then since we do on-prem and we do cloud, we developed the move to cloud capability that I'll be discussing today. And please generate any questions you have and send them in so that they're queued up when we do Q&A at the end. So why do people choose AWS? First of all, AWS is the market leader. They have half again the share of Azure, and more than 4 times the share of Google Cloud Platform. These measurements are always close rather than completely accurate, but these are similar to numbers I've seen elsewhere, and I included a link to them. So they're the safe choice. AWS is also the first mover, and there's a lot of excitement in that, and they really are in the forefront of developing a lot of services. They have the most services, as you might expect, but they've done their homework. They have not languished on their lead. They work very hard to stay in front of the market as much as they can. They're especially strong in AI, but quick warning, each of the services has their strength in different AI services. So if you're going to move to AI and you're still looking for a platform, please look carefully at the offerings from each and think about it, because the devil may be in the details for making that choice for you. But AWS is very strong. AWS has the largest distribution footprint. People go to public cloud because they want that distribution. AWS is the biggest there. So if you're big, they're ready to support you. If you're in a specialty area, they're ready to support you too. Their pricing, service, and support are competitive. You can lose your eyesight trying to go over the fine details of pricing and so on for each of the cloud providers. There's lots of existing expertise. AWS has been around enough now that there actually are people who've done major AWS projects, more than for the other platforms. Finally, no one ever got fired for buying AWS Cloud. They're the market leader, and people are very trusting of and feel very safe with them. So when we look at moving to cloud, a data-driven approach for planning and migrating is critical to success, and that's Gartner. So we're going to talk about a framework for how to migrate, and then Chris is going to demo using Unravel to carry that out. So this talk is useful whether you use Unravel or not. And what we're hoping to show is that Unravel can accelerate your progress and give you more confidence and trust in what you're doing, especially for larger moves, as you tend to have with big data, as you tend to have with streaming data. The really big picture, there's steps around governance and so on, and IBM will speak to those. We're a little more specific. We're a little more roll up your sleeves today. So we're not going to be talking about governance or the broad future of your company as it relates to cloud. Those are great discussion topics. We're going to just talk more about how to move workloads, one or in groups at a time. And 10 steps to leave your data center for the cloud. So first, you identify the on-premises workloads you're going to move to cloud. And we'll demo how to characterize them so that you can make a smart assessment. And of course, the ones you're going to move to cloud first are the ones that have a good target technology in the cloud for you and your approach. You're going to baseline the performance and resource use before moving. Can't calculate ROI if you don't know the original costs and the original resource use and how that compares. You may choose to optimize the workloads on premises before you move them. It sounds ideal to do it that way, of course. Why move something that you haven't optimized? But in real life, you often end up moving first and optimizing later. And Unravel helps with that. So the next step is you then match the services and components that you're using on premises, which you may never have thought of that way before. You kind of x-ray what you're doing on premises and see what are the supporting technologies and elements to their equivalence on AWS. And the asterisk is this is an AWS specific step. What we're going to show you here today will be for AWS and only applies specifically to AWS. You estimate the cost and performance of the software post-move, and the cost and performance of the software you move to, that's going to be AWS services on AWS. So it's either going to be AWS services like EMR or a third-party service that runs on AWS like Databricks. Estimate the cost and schedule for the move. Again, that's dependent on the service, but that takes time and effort and puts off, the time when you start getting the benefits of being in the cloud. Track and ensure the success of the migration. Most people do those with spreadsheets. Unravel happens to have an approach for doing that built into the software that encompasses all your workloads. Then you optimize the workloads in the cloud. You tend to get bills from providers, even AWS, who are quite sophisticated, that just sum up your entire company's usage for a month. And that number, if it starts changing, you don't necessarily know why it changed. And that, again, is a key of Unravel's strengths, is helping you do that. Managing the workloads in the cloud, you've got to have visibility, got to have the ability to interact. Unravel actually generates recommendations proactively to help you avoid problems. And then rinse and repeat, because you do this for a group of workloads, you see what your success is, you do a postmortem, and then you go and get some more workloads and move those to cloud with greater surety or confidence that you know which workloads will move successfully and easily. And again, the start steps are specific for AWS. You'll get slides and a recording of the talk afterward. I should have mentioned that before. So you'll get all this to peruse later. You don't have to take detailed notes. Or sometimes you have to end up screen grabbing things. So let's look at both the on-prem and the cloud positives so that we make a fair comparison. So what are the on-prem positives? Don't leave these behind unthinkingly. Make sure that you more than match them when you move to cloud. Your on-premises setup is already there. Your skilled staff are in place, but keeping that group going can be hard. Someone leaves, they're very hard to replace, especially if you have some older technologies in-house. You have centralized management. You have a comfort level with security. Your operational costs are lower because it's CapEx and OpEx, right? You pay CapEx for the servers and for the place they're in, or you're leasing that to somebody. But if you're buying it, that's capital expenditures. And then so the operational costs are lower because CapEx has already taken place. There's inherent cost control. If you go to bring a big job to your in-house estate, the people who manage it will say, are you nuts? Or at least, you got to get some budget to help cover us for helping support this. So there's an inherent cost control there, which is frustrating as heck when you have something you need to do, but does serve as a check on spending. And there's one location to manage if you have a single server estate, more, of course, if you have more, but you don't have to think about the worldwide footprint of AWS, for instance, and how you're going to use it. In the cloud, it's easy to start projects. Some of you may be chasing projects that are blowing up in the cloud that aren't planned for and aren't budgeted, and you're just getting bills. It's attractive to staff. People want to work on cloud projects. They know cloud's the future. There's less management burden than having all those servers of your own. World-class security, although there are still concerns, of course. Our financial service customers are quite cautious in using the cloud. Low capital costs, of course, because it's all operational. Inherent scalability. Part of what Unravel does is it helps you manage scaling up and scaling down smoothly so that you always maintain a given margin over and above your expected usage. And that's hard to do with a lot of other tools, and Unravel helps. And finally, globally distributed. That's a huge strength for AWS. They're everywhere. And finally, just in terms of cool factor, cloud is hot and on-premises is not. There we go. So move to cloud is a grand challenge for IT. Maps of the world used to show monsters in the seas to capture the fact that ships often didn't make it. So grand challenges in the sciences and technology are things that really kind of focus the whole industry and the whole endeavor. Science and math have grand challenges. Well, for IT, moving to cloud is a grand challenge, and getting the details right for your company is an important part of that. So the promised ROI may not be realized by your business. A lot of it has to do with cost. Our CDO, Sandeep, was speaking the other day, and he said, you end up paying. Sorry, I'm getting a little slow performance here. There we go. So there's hidden costs in the cloud world. Pay as you go, no capping costs. Hidden costs, you may need to hire someone who's expert at some of this stuff. Pay as you go, you don't have a cap. There's bad cloud usage behavior among end users. They're not seeing the bills, so they just make the query they want to make. And some of those queries can be very expensive. Performance, you often have shared infrastructure. You can set aside infrastructure. When you have shared infrastructure, you have noisy neighbor problems. Resource locality, so things are located in places and the people using them might be located in different places. And it may be that your on-prem architecture was more performant than what you've set up in the cloud. Okay, so first you identify on-prem workloads to move to cloud. So you create a set of steps for yourself. And this is an example set of steps. You list all your workloads from all sources. That includes third-party software and open source software hosted on your company-owned servers, like the technologies that Unravel especially supports. Software created in-house is hosted on company-owned servers. You've got open source software, third-party software, and in-house software running on public cloud platforms, private clouds, or hybrid cloud servers. So you list all of these workloads and all the sources. And if some of them are in the cloud, why did those go to the cloud? And how's that gone? What has been the good and bad things you've had with that? Some workloads you can move to SaaS. So if you're using customer resource management in-house, you may want to change to Salesforce. It's an industry standard, right? So in that case, you're going to have to move data and you're going to have to provision that and set it up. But it's a little different from what we usually call move to cloud. And finally, you agree the criteria for moving workloads to the cloud. You do that separate from looking at any particular workload. People will have strong feelings about what should and shouldn't move. So you set up a checklist to go through to make that decision in a repeatable way. And then you stack rank the workloads by priority according to your criteria. And then you find the chicken and egg platform, which we've solved in this case because we're focusing on AWS. Which workloads you move depend on the cloud platform that you've chosen. And the cloud platform that you choose depends on the workloads that you've got to support. You've chosen AWS, and that's your business relationship, and that's your target, solves that problem. It actually turned out scientists found that there were dinosaurs hatching out of eggs before there were chickens. Chickens are evolved from dinosaurs, believe it or not. So I do happen to believe it. So the answer to the chicken and egg problem is a dinosaur. And in this case, we see Unravel Data as the dinosaur that gives you the information you need to make these decisions. You can analyze your workloads on premises against every major cloud platform and get answers on what it would mean to move to that cloud platform. So given that you're on AWS, you can make a comparison and make sure that the services and pricing and so on that you're being offered on AWS are competitive. So then you have to baseline performance and resource use. So you characterize your on-premises workloads so you can reproduce them or close to reproduce them. You identify CPU and memory usage. You may not think about that too much because you're on-prem, right? You already paid for it, but you have to do that. You look at all the elements in your software stack. Again, X-ray vision, right? Identify dependencies such as the data tables that are used. Per cloud platform, you identify the software targets. I'll show a chart on that soon. You identify custom code that needs to be ported. You specify adaptation work needed for the cloud software versions. You specify adaptation work needed for the differences in the cloud software, right? If you're going to Databricks, that's a big move to go from a typical on-prem setup to Databricks, whereas moving to EMR is more of a lift and shift. Okay, then you can optimize the workloads on premises, and I'm just going to mention this because not everyone will do it. But you do it if you can. Create your own decision process, work to reduce guesswork, and think carefully about this one. We're always in a hurry to get stuff done, but moving an unoptimized workload might just be shifting trouble. Then this is the most fun slide, and I'm going to take a minute and explain it. So you match services to cloud equivalents, and we have a blog post. When you get these slides, it'll include a link to the blog post that talks quite a bit about this. But this chart comes from there. So the major steps, look at the blue bars going across. The major things you do with data are you capture it, you store it, you transform it, you publish it, and then you consume it. Excuse me. So that's the rainbow from the beginning of capturing to the end of consuming. So Unravel has focused historically on the transform area, and the blue columns are the services that you have available to you on AWS. So for instance, in the upper left, for batch ingest, AWS offers Amazon Kinesis and Lambda. But you also have access to open source services. And then third-party services run on different cloud platforms, but most of them run on AWS because it's the biggest and the oldest and everything else. So those are your software choices. The services that we specifically support all fall in the different red boxes. So for AWS, we support their managed streaming for Kafka, and we support open source Kafka. Within Transform, we support most of these. So we support EMR, Glue, we support their data pipelines. We support Databricks is now on AWS as well. This slide is a bit of an older list, but it doesn't include a lot of confusing stuff as well. And finally, the dotted red area that you see here, publish, that's an area we're moving into. So we're looking at, we're moving towards supporting services like Redshift, like BigQuery, and more to come. And if you have questions about that, please contact us. I think we might already have AWS Glue. So this slide is really a great educational slide. When you talk to colleagues who are working on different clouds, this really should match what they're talking about to what you're used to in the AWS world. So please, use this as a resource in talking to Unravel. If you do that, in talking to colleagues and talking to people who use other cloud platforms or your own. Then I'm going to go through the next few slides a little quickly because I'm excited to get to the demo. So you have to estimate the cost and performance in the cloud once you know what it is on premises. So you have to look at the instance sizes, CPU costs, memory costs, storage costs, networking costs, software licensing costs, and a lot more. And what Unravel does is it automatically recommends to you all of these things, what you should be looking at in what kind of instances, what kind of usage you should expect, and what the costs are going to be. And then you have to estimate the cost and schedule for the moves. This is largely a manual step, but garbage in, garbage out. If you haven't taken the time and effort to carefully analyze what you've got on premises and what it's going to look like in the cloud, you're going to have a heck of a time figuring out what the move's going to look like, right? So part of what Unravel offers is it helps you with, you're standing on two legs. You're standing on the on-prem you're coming from and the cloud that you're going to. And in order to get the move right, you have to have those details right. And Unravel very quickly comes up with estimates for you on both of those, which are quite reliable and saves you a lot of time, energy. There's also a governance issue here. If you don't know what you've got on premises and you don't know what you're going to, you really can't make this move as a business decision. You're kind of winging it. So we're recommending, of course, our software as something that gives you firm enough estimates that you can actually do business planning on them. And then you need to track and ensure the success of the migration, workload by workload, what has already moved, what's in process, what is not going to move, what's the effect on the on-premises estate. You get this weird kind of effect where you may actually end up underusing servers that you're paying for. Do you sell them? Do you mothball them? Who knows? And then what's happening on the cloud estate? Are you creating noisy neighbors for yourself within your cloud estate? And then finally, in the cloud, you optimize each workload in the cloud. Even if you optimized it on premises, you're going to have to still have some steps to optimize it further in the cloud. You'll be most of the way there. You manage the workload in the cloud. You learn idiosyncrasies. What's something. Why does a query take a different amounts of time at different times when you're counting on it coming in within an envelope? And then you grab some more on-prem workloads and you do it all over again. So basically, where Unravel comes in is we're the automatic approach versus the manual transmission. And driving a manual car is a lot of fun if you know how to do it, but it's also a lot of work. Driving an automatic is easier, it's less expensive, it's managed for you. So the ironic thing, though, is using Unravel to do a cloud migration. Unravel is actually also more fun, because you get answers quicker, you get quick feedback, you get that responsiveness. So we like to say that it's the best of both worlds, and we look forward to hearing back from you if you proceed on a cloud migration working with us, if you agree. And I'm now, I've been doing a lot of talking, so I'm now going to take a little break here and let Chris come forward with the demo.
Thanks, Floyd. All right, give me 1 second here. I'm going to share my screen here. I just need Floyd, if you could just confirm you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
All right. Hey, folks. Again, my name is Chris Santiago. I lead the solutions engineering group over here at Unravel Data. And kind of taking some of Floyd's themes here, I'm going to show you an automatic approach versus a manual approach. Now, regardless of what steps that you take, either if you're going to do this manually or automatic, those 10 steps are very, very good, time tested. We've seen multiple customers, whether they use this or not. I mean, that's a good template to really start thinking about framing, scheduling, projecting, forecasting, whatever your cloud migration projects may be. But us here at Unravel, we've got a very great way to not only just automate that process, but think of it as leading your decisions based on actual data points, right? Instead of guessing and asking your constituents, the users, on how they use the data, what's the most important products, applications on the cluster today. Let's eliminate that, and let's actually get those answers from the tool itself. And so, steps, majority of the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for the most part here, is I'm going to cover it in this first half here. And really what it's, when you first start thinking about, hey, I want to move to the cloud, AWS specifically, you need to start off with data points, right? Whether you're doing this manually, whether you're doing this with a tool that automates this, like Unravel, you need to get that information first. And so the first screen I'm going to step you guys through here is a cluster discovery report, and it does exactly that, right? Where it's going to just give you just a starting point of what's the services that I'm running on my environment today. This could be on-prem. We've also had customers actually do replatforming from other cloud services as well. So, don't want to just restrict this, solely to on-prem. We've seen other customers use this for replatforming from, one cloud to the next. But, it's always good to get a first baseline of like, what are we using? What are the services that is actually being used in this environment? Because, hey, in my future state architecture, do I have coverage for some of the services that I'm using today? If not, then I need to formulate a plan on, getting that, accomplished, right? A couple of other key things you see here is the number of hosts, disk space. So this is always a big one, right? You've got lots of data stored in your data lake today. What's the level of effort of moving some of this data? And I'll actually double click on here shortly. In the middle here, think of this as going to be more like, how are people using the clusters or my big data environment specifically, right? And so application type, this would be very useful for understanding, hey, what's my percentage of Spark workloads versus maybe some of the more batch-oriented engines like MapReduce and or Tez. You'd be surprised when you run this report and really understand how much, what you think, versus what the actual data tells you. It kind of tells you, it can tell you two different stories, right? And that also obviously can formulate your decisions on what you might want to do from within the cloud. These next two are pretty self-explanatory by users. So a lot of times I've seen a lot of customers have, different product lines or different line of businesses using different service accounts. And so we can start getting a differentiating factor from here as well. If we want to maybe like take out some folks, you can start seeing what that percentage is as well. Same thing from a queue perspective. So if you're using, on an on-prem environment and you're using queues, and you're using them heavily, and maybe your strategy is moving your workloads based on queue, you can get these data points here. But again, it's really just getting a baseline. How are people using the cluster today? And basing this on actual data points. That's the big key here, right? I'm not going in and talking with folks. I'm actually not talking to anybody and getting this information directly from the Unravel interface. On the right-hand side here, this is going to be more specific on like just utilization overall of the cluster, right? CPU, memory is our two key metrics in terms of understanding, how the cluster is actually being used. I've seen customers use this side of the this report for just really understanding like, hey, maybe I forecasted I was going to be using, really beefy nodes, but then, over time, the actual usage maybe was half that, or in this particular case, 23% of utilization over, this week period, or memory was underutilized as well, right? Again, these are data points that are really going to really drive like what decisions do I need to make? What's the instance size that I should be using? Should I be actually, now that I'm actually replatforming, should I actually be taking the opportunity to actually resize my workloads based on what the actual usage is, right? Again, baseline, trying to get this information from you because this is what's really going to drive your decisions based on actual data points. Down here at the bottom, again, heat map visualizations, the lighter colors is lightly used, the darker colors is darkly used. And really what this is really just showing you is like, hey, is this really bursty, right? Do I have a lot of workloads where it might be like, certain times in the day where it's really busy and then it's not? Well, maybe you could do some more like elasticity, like type of services, like an EMR, where I can go ahead and scale up and scale down. Or maybe we do ephemeral clusters where, hey, on these big, peak times, maybe I can have just clusters that are just very specific to that particular workload, right? So now that you have all this, these data points, one other thing I want to show from, just getting your bearings is from the data side. Huge, right? I mean, that's always like the next question is like, how am I going to get all this data? But even more so, if I'm going to start looking at this and maybe doing this in like a phased approach, like phase 1, maybe I want to bring in 50% of the data, phase 2, phase 3, you really have to understand like, hey, is this data hot, warm, cold? And B, how does this relate to the workloads that I'm actually moving into the data into the cloud? And so on this report, this shows things more from a data specific side. And so I can see things in terms of like overall, hey, how are my tables actually being used? What's the size that was created? What was the total size overall? The number of users that have been hitting this? Like, what are my trends, over time on how people are actually accessing the tables, even down to the partition level as well. If we want to get even deeper, we can get in and double click here on the table side. And now we're looking at it from a table specific centric view. And now we can say, for example, just, throwing an example out here, let's just say this particular table, my date dim table, this is a very, very, hugely used table. And this is one that I want to actually bring into the cloud, right? And so the next question is like, who's using that table? What's, is it actually being used, very, widely used, et cetera, and so forth. And to answer those questions, you've got this color designation here, which shows like hot, warm, and cold. So, okay, yes, this is a table that's actually being used. This is a policy that you can set just overall. So you can kind of classify this how you want. But like, hey, if it's like cold data, nobody's really touched it in like a couple of months, maybe some years, let's leave it in the existing data lake. And we'll just move in like the really hotly used data into the cloud. And so you can start answering those questions. Another thing that you can do too is one of the unique value that we have from within Unravel is we actually have a good connection of the type of applications that actually touch that table. So in this particular example, I went ahead and selected that date table. Bear with me. Assume this is a very popular table. Maybe I want to understand what are some of the applications that actually hit this from within my environment today, whether this be Impala, Spark, MapReduce, Hive, LLAP, if you're coming in from a Hortonworks or CDP platform. All this stuff really starts resonating because when you're looking at moving workloads to the cloud, it's not just an application. There's dependencies. Is this part of a workflow? What tables are associated with this, so on and so forth, because you got to think of things holistically in that way. And also, hey, what are the resource, constraints that these applications take over time? Like this is the stuff that factors into what your final state modern architecture would be, right? And so this is just a highlight on the data side. We've got a plethora of more features, but say now you've got your idea of where you want to go, and now your next question, I think it's step 4, step 5 in your steps there, Floyd, is really now start understanding costs. What should this be like? Really start just kind of mixing and matching of what that the final state may be in the cloud. And so I'll focus for today on this workload fit. And we've got lift and shift type of models as well, but we'll focus in on here where we can be a little bit more strategic. And so think of maybe you folks are on the call here that are looking to potentially I want to move away from a multi-tenant environment, and I want to have like very clusters that are very specific, EMR clusters that are very specific to a specific product line, specific user, specific use case, whatever it is, right? And so what we do is, in order for us to start this, some of our recommendations that we can provide, we'll start off by asking the user specific questions, right? Now we've established, we know what's going on with the user, we know the data, so on and so forth. But, let's go ahead and take a step back and now just understand, hey, maybe I'm just really interested on, my Spark workloads, right? And maybe I'm going to have Spark running on my EMR environment, so on and so forth. We can leave everything else here. I mean, I could definitely filter down by, specific departments, specific priorities, so on and so forth. But keeping things simple, we'll say all Spark resources here. Give me 1 second here. Let's look this up. Oops. And so the next thing is like I'll go ahead and select a heat map, just to kind of get a good sense of, just like the heat map that we had seen in the previous report. How is this actually being used? Is this something that is kind of bursty? And this is kind of bursty. You could see just based on just job submissions alone, you can see that during the day it seems like it's pretty heavy. Friday looks like there's probably a lot of batch workloads. Somebody like comes in, they probably submitted their job, they're done for the weekend. Saturday, Friday, Saturday, that it all gets run, over the weekend. Probably everybody's doing it, and then the data is ready by Monday, right? And then you've got, your exploratory analysis coming on here, right? Just making up a scenario, but say that is the pattern that you guys are using for your Spark workloads in this particular environment. So once we have that, again, more data points to really kind of make your decision, is we've got this second piece here. Now, before I go into the details here, you do have the ability to essentially say like, okay, with this particular slice that you had provided me here, what's the service that you would like to use? And in our case, in this example, I'll go ahead and say EMR. What's the region? So like I can go ahead and select the specific regions, VM types. And so we'll by, our tool will bring in list price, but I'm sure a lot of you folks on the call maybe have some pre-existing agreed upon discounts with Amazon. And so you can go ahead and put your custom costs there. You can go ahead and deselect what, VM types or EC2 instances that maybe doesn't pertain to you, or you just don't want to use, period, so on and so forth. And then once you actually select that, that's when you get into back to this report. And I've ran this before. It takes a couple minutes for us to do the analysis, but in the interest of time, I pre-ran this earlier. And here's where where things get interesting, right? And so based on parameters, based on the VM types that I had selected previously, we pull this information also too from within the source systems like Embari or like Cloudera. And we estimate that would be. And the reason why it's text boxes here is because if you wanted to say like, hey, I'm going to be growing like double, triple, quadruple, by the time we move into the cloud, we want to have that ability to change. And so that's what we do here. Obviously, there's a cost for storage. Once we do that, on the right-hand side, this is where things get, really interesting, right? Because one, we're going to actually not only give you pricing forecasting, but we're also going to give you, the reasoning why we came up with that forecasting, right? And so the way to read this is on my Spark workloads that I had selected, above, if I were to move them into their own EMR cluster, and I want to have no impact to the performance of their jobs, but I want to be able to actually get instances that are sized on actual usage. That's the key word there. What would those recommendations be? And that's what you see down here. So 13 core node types, 1 master core, and based on what we've projected here, you can project a $104 per hour cost if we were to move these guys solely just to EMR. 80%, this is, think of this as like 80% of my jobs need to match their SLAs. 20% of my jobs can take a hit because obviously it's cheaper, right? And so for folks where, performance is top of mind, production, 100% is probably the way to go. To the other extreme, 80% would be, hey, this is just my development exploratory cluster. Most of the jobs that are run here are just development anyways. I don't care if like the longest running ones have to just run just a little bit longer, but cost is most important for me, right? And so we give you those parameters here, but really the net here is what it enables you as the person who's making these decisions. It gives you a very, very nice report for us to go ahead and slice and dice different types of combinations on what you want to see. And even more so, really, back it by actual data usage. So, I mean, again, that's a key word there because you're not guessing anymore. You're not going off of like a spreadsheet where you asked questions and maybe one of the folks that you've interviewed maybe missed kind of the complexity or the size of the data that they're actually running. This doesn't lie because we're actually monitoring the whole entire environment and we're actually leading this off of from actual data. And so one other thing I'll show you here is because we did notice it was kind of a little bit of bursty type of workloads. If we wanted to leverage something like an EMR and always running cluster, this is something where we can actually provide some sort of like auto scaling up and down type of recommendations. So in this particular case, if you were to follow this schedule, we can actually defray my $104 down to $78. So again, lots of different ways of showing you guys, what's the best way for me to make my migration report or my migration project. Because at the end of the day, you're making a very big decision, right? There's going to be a lot of people associated making that move. You want to make sure that you're making the right decisions. And by the way, let's actually base this based on actual data and data points. So that way you can be very confident and ultimately de-risk your migration once you're, right before you do the migration itself. Last but not least, so you do the migration. Probably the most important thing to think about is, are you getting the same performance, everything that you expected, or even better, hopefully, in this new platform, right? Because at the end of the day, if your users are not happy with this new architecture, it's very possible that they may want to go back to the old legacy way, right? And we want to avoid that, we don't want to waste anybody's time and money for that, right? And so this assurance piece is very, very powerful because you need to be able to go and baseline all the information that you've had from an on-prem standpoint, and then really understand that from, hey, am I getting that same value from within my new platform? The good news is Unravel not only helps you from that migration standpoint, but we can also just really make assurance, guaranteed for your customers, right? Or for your end users, because what we're going to do is, just like how we've always done, even on the on-prem side, let's provide that application performance management aspect to really just make sure that we're showing users where things are, where the bottlenecks are, right? In this particular case, this is a Spark streaming application. And so, if I wanted to understand, hey, while the Spark streaming app was running, hey, where were some of my bottlenecks, so on and so forth. We can leave the demo of our APM capabilities, at another time. But the other thing to keep in mind too is we do have some intelligence that's built in where we're going to go and actually look at, this application, whether it be a Spark application, whether it be, a batch application that you're running in EMR, so on and so forth. Or even if you're using this in Databricks, and by the way, we do support AWS Databricks as well. Having some proactive insights to basically say, hey, here's where some of the bottlenecks challenges that you have in this particular case, a Spark streaming app. This becomes very, very helpful because now you can actually do an apples to apples comparison versus this is what I'm doing today. 6 months ago, I have that data, collected. This is how it's running today in my new EMR or Databricks environment. Let's actually compare and see what's going on. And if there are discrepancies, because, hey, you are in a new platform, there are going to be some new challenges. What can we do to make sure that, we're able to meet or exceed the performance that we were doing from our legacy big data platform that we just moved off of. And so yeah, here's just an example, guys, of how you can use a tool like Unravel to really help mitigate your risk when you're doing your migration. And then finally, once you're actually in the cloud, continue to ensure that you're getting the value that the cloud providers, your SIs, whoever you're working with, had promised with a tool like Unravel to make sure and assure that you are getting the performance and ROI at the end of the day that you come to expect in this new environment. That said, hand it off over to you, Floyd. Hopefully I gave you enough time.
Fantastic, Chris. And in fact, I'm gonna stay on with you a little bit. And a couple of questions came in while you were speaking.
Oh, nice.
Even if you did cover these points, please just reemphasize them.
Sure.
So, can you do comparison reports, and what about chargeback reports?
Comparison reports in terms of like I'm going to make an assumption here. I've got like maybe my Azure environment that I could project, versus like my AWS environment. Absolutely, right. This talk is focused on AWS, and obviously it's a very popular choice. But but we can definitely do a comparison versus any platform, really. Even Google as well.
And how about chargeback?
Yeah, chargeback. Yes, very, very popular, especially when we go into the cloud. We didn't go into the features from an on-prem perspective, but we do, as you guys had seen, we have very deep analysis on the jobs, the applications that are submitted. And so from an on-prem perspective, we can actually show like, hey, this particular line of business is 20%, 25%. We kind of showed it on the cluster discovery report, but it makes even much of a difference once you're actually in the cloud, because now you're paying as you go, right? It's not a sunk cost as much as it was when you were on-prem. And so having a chargeback scenario of really understanding of like, okay, who just spent 80% of my bill, my AWS bill, because now we're like, over budget. That's the level of detail that we're able to provide once you're actually in the cloud.
There was a question whether you can view other clusters in the same screen. That came across. Question came early on. I'm guessing the answer is yes.
Yeah. So we can. I guess it depends on the scenario. I think if you're doing, I didn't show it on the screen just in the interest of time, but we do have a lift and shift model where we can actually show like, hey, this is what if we were to take part and parcel. That's always just going to be just this is where if we were to do a full-on lift and shift, and this is if we do it optimized. That's just going to be one example. But on that workload fit report, yeah, you can actually choose, the specific instances that you want, and then you can actually go ahead and compare. Now, if it's going to be like a different platform to a different platform, you just have to rerun the report. But that information is stored anyways, and so you can do some comparison you want. It wouldn't be on the same screen, but we have the data points, and you can go ahead and just kind of analyze it yourself.
I will also mention that our engineering team, if you ask them things really nice, they do some surprising things. So,
yeah. I want to put them on the spot, yes.
if you do have a really specific need, and you can show a test that it makes sense, they're engineering oriented, and as a company, we're very customer oriented, more than product oriented. So you get good answers there. Couple more questions that have come in. I'm going to answer this, and you tell me if I'm wrong. Question is there an extra cost for migration reporting? And the answer is no. We don't charge per function. Is that right, Chris?
That is correct. Yeah. So and obviously we can work with you folks. At the end of the day, migration, the way we see things, is just one step of the overall journey, right? And so whether you're on-prem, in the cloud, and or either or, and you want to have migration capabilities to really kind of guide you, we want to be there every step of the way, so that way you're making informed decisions and getting the ROI that you expect in your big data platforms.
Question came in: does Unravel help with forecasting costs in the cloud? And my answer to that is we definitely help with forecasting costs in the cloud for migration. As Chris was demonstrating, that's a huge strength of ours. I don't know more generally if it's speculative, something you might be doing. I don't know that we have that capability.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk on it through. So we do. It's not GA'd yet, but we do have forecasting abilities already built in on our on-prem platform. And so I've been working closely with engineering in terms of, actually getting that into our cloud APM tools. So think of it as such as like, hey, I want to forecast based on, the way that my users are using my whole entire environment today. When can I forecast if I'm going to hit the budget or exceed my budget, in the next 5-6 months. We have the technology there. It's just retrofitting it. So that way it makes sense for our cloud customers.
Yes. Oh, here's a good question. So 2 questions together. Is Unravel partnered with AWS? And can Unravel be purchased off the marketplace and count toward your buy down? And the answer is we are partnered with AWS. We can be purchased off the marketplace, and we do count toward your buy down.
Right.
We actually are having some discussions right now as we're in December. Many companies finish their fiscal year at the same time as the calendar year or very close. So we actually are working with some customers on specifically that. Yeah. Is that right? All right.
Yeah, no, you answered it perfectly.
Okay, good deal. Good deal. Oh, and forecast as in predictable cost. Yes. What would you say the accuracy is on our forecast, Chris? I've heard good things, but is that experience too?
Yeah. So when you talk about forecast, I'm assuming you mean like when I was showing on the screen of this is what this is the type of instances that you should be using. Very accurate. I mean, it's better than what I've seen customers do today, where it's like they're going to base it off of like what they have today and kind of guessing like if they could maybe restructure it. Most customers will just say, hey, I'm using these like 32 core 168 or 128 gig RAM machines, and I'm just going to go ahead and just part and parcel put it up there because that's what I'm using today. And that's not the case, especially if you start splitting up the workloads, right? And so our advantage is we know exactly how much you're using, right? Even with those beefy nodes, maybe they only need 4 cores and 32 gigs, right? And because with our technology, we're able to get that, and not only get that, but then really kind of just do some run it through our algorithm. And so I'm confident, and we've had customers actually use our recommendations for that, not just from a from a projection standpoint, but actually use it as as what their future state may be, and they've been happy with the results.
Yes. And everyone out there, if you find yourself with more in-depth questions as we're finishing up, we're very easy to talk to. So having a meeting with us is a great way to go into depth about what you're needing to. And there's certainly, as with any of these things, there's no obligation. So please feel comfortable to reach out to us if you want to go in depth about your specific questions. If you have questions you don't want to ask because they imply something confidential, all of that stuff. We work very closely with customers doing really important stuff, and that's what we're here for. We enjoy it. And I'm just going to wind up the talk now with a few more slides. So big picture of your migration journey: you're assessing, then you're planning, then you're migrating, then you're optimizing and scaling. We don't actually move data, right? We don't copy data from one place to another. We have partnerships with some companies that do that, which we can talk more about separately. But everything else on here, we do hands-on ourselves. You can do it with our tool and with our support. We are a force multiplier. This is a repeat of a previous slide. These are the technologies that we support most strongly on premises, most strongly in the cloud, and then the move to cloud process that Chris just showed you. And this is a reprise of the 10 steps. So use this in discussions when you have mixed business and technical people in the same room. Use this framework and say, okay, which step are we talking about? Because it stops people from talking past each other. If you're really involved in characterizing your on-premises estate, you have to be told that you're now talking about part of the move or optimizing at the other end. So this framework is just super helpful for that kind of grounding those kind of discussions and making them more productive. And then finally, some resources and a secret bonus that is not on this slide. So there's a blog post about cloud migration. Oh, there is there's 10 steps. There's why they fail, our webinars that we did. AWS did a video about working with us. Microsoft did a blog post about working with us. You can try Unravel for free. You can contact Unravel. And we just recently had a customer conference, and it was double secret just for customers, right? But we do have recordings of that. And so with people who come on board as customers, all of that video then becomes a resource that you can access. The cool thing is, a lot of the discussion we had with those customers was about their on-premises stuff and kind of beginning move to cloud, but they are so enthusiastic about using Unravel in on-premises work, solving problems, getting rid of problems before they come up, fixing problems, and then doing new things because they can do their existing stuff cheaper and with more confidence and with fewer people. So they have resources freed up, budget freed up that they can use to do new things and advance their huge company forward like a startup, right? So it was a lot of fun, and we're having fun doing what we're doing, and your guys' interest is much appreciated. I'm wrapping up, and we look forward to hearing from some of you after this webinar. Thanks a lot. And for Chris and Kwok, who's been supporting us, thank you very much.
Thanks, folks. Have a good one.